week I had the chance to visit our pre-K classes to teach about Sukkot, and I explained that on a windy Sukkot night, something that we're always worried about in the middle of the night is whether or not the sukkah will fly into the pool. Well, one sweet preschooler raised her hand and said, "Rabbi Guzik, I am so lucky." I said, "Why are you lucky?" She said, "I'm so lucky because I don't have a pool." I love it. I love it. It gets better. Then I explained that it's a tradition for Rabbi Sherman and our middle son Zachary to build our sukkah. And yes, okay, the tradition is that we build the sukkah, but it's also tradition that no matter what, each year, we're always missing a part. Every single year. And when I said this to the preschoolers, another one raised their hand and said, "Listen, whenever you're building, you just need to check the Lego drawer first." I told you, fantastic advice from preschoolers. But there was one quiet preschooler who looked a little troubled, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Rabbi Guzik, what happens if it rains?" And that's when I was reminded that being in preschool is just like being in the Beit Midrash, being in the house of study. Because I want you to listen to what the Mishnah says in the Masechet Sukkah about rain. All 7 days of Sukkot, a person renders their Sukkah his permanent residence, and his home his temporary residence. And if rain falls, from when do you know you have permission to leave the sukkah? The answer, you are permitted to leave from the point that it is raining so hard that the food on the table will spoil. And then the rabbis give an analogy. They say this is just like when a servant comes to pour wine for their master, and the master, instead of saying thank you, if you will, actually pours water in their servant's face, as if to say, "You're not welcome here." So too, remember, a master in the Talmud is like God. It's an analogy for God. God is telling us, if it's raining, I don't want you to suffer. If you can't bear the rain, then get out of the sukkah and go inside. So as usual, our rabbinic tradition is both about practicalities and the limitations of the human heart. Because think about what's sensible. If you're sitting in your sukkah and you are drenched, then obviously what? You should go inside. But the Ritva, a 13th century Sephardic rabbi, Rabbi Yom Tov ben Abraham, conveys there's a difference between running inside your home during a rainstorm versus preemptively leaving your sukkah because bad weather might be on the way. So what is this like? It's like in 2024 where we pull out the weather app and we say, "Oh, look, it looks like there might be rain in a few days. So I think just in case, we shouldn't go sit outside in the sukkah. Better safe than sorry." But the Ritva's answer suggests that sometimes we are too quick to leave uncomfortable situations. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to build up grit or strength to ride out metaphorical impending storms. And because we leave too quickly, we don't know how much our body or our minds or our hearts can handle. And you can extend the metaphor as far as you would like. When work becomes a bit harder than we might have originally imagined, the hours are longer. Maybe the tasks we thought that we were given, maybe we don't think we're capable of doing them. Maybe we are within a conversation with someone with whom we vastly disagree. What the Ritva is encouraging us to do is sit just a little bit longer, to see if we can ride out the drizzle. Just a few raindrops that teach us what we're really made of. But to be honest, that's only half of the lesson. Just like those preschoolers, the rabbis in the Talmud were brilliant because they also gave us permission to leave the sukkah when we do know those walls of the sukkah will inevitably come crashing down. Yes, the physical walls of the sukkah, but also the walls that define our lives. Because think of toxic relationships, perhaps ones that we've been in, perhaps ones that we might be in, perhaps ones that we see our loved ones in. And we ask ourselves the question, why didn't they leave? Whether romantic or platonic or professional, how many times have we said to ourselves, why am I staying here? Why do I let this person speak to me in this manner? Why do they not treat me in the way that I wish or deserve to be treated? In a way that might be even called abusive. To those that continue to remain in situations in which we know this isn't just uncomfortable, but this is unhealthy. Sukkot, this very holiday, teaches us that God doesn't want anyone to live like this, to work like this, to emotionally sit within a sukkah like this any longer. But the hardest part of the teaching is that while we are given permission to leave the sukkah, there really isn't a defining point in the rabbinic literature that suggests an exact time to get out, which means the person who is struggling must ultimately decide for themselves, now is the time when I know I can't stay any longer. Trying to find a time to leave before the walls come down, before it's too late to get out. Now, for those who are listening this morning, if Sukkot is considered Zman Simchatenu, the time of our joy, then we have to ask ourselves the question, in whichever hard, difficult situation you find yourself, you have to think, will you truly find joy in riding out a storm and experiencing what we said might be some drizzle? Or does the dream of leaving the sukkah let you imagine a joy you never thought possible? Nowhere does it say in the Mishnah that leaving the sukkah is easy, but permission is granted nonetheless. If you are considering leaving a metaphorical sukkah of any kind, please know that your clergy is here to help you along your journey, a journey that may feel at first stormy or filled with unknowns. We know it's not easy to command joy on a holiday. We understand the essence of the other holidays. Zman Cherutenu is Passover, the time of our freedom. Zman Matan Toratenu is Shavuot, the time of receiving the Torah. But Zman Simchatenu suggests that we must experience joy over these next few days. But for those that are teetering, sitting in a sukkah, experiencing anguish, how does one command happiness? Rabbi Ari Hasit, one of the deans of the Schechter School in Jerusalem, says as he watches missiles fly over Israel, as people are sitting in their sukkot, and he sees people actually running from a sukkah to a more permanent structure for protection, he gives a beautiful answer to the question of how does one command or experience joy. He teaches, remember, some commentators suggest that maybe it's not a command to be joyous, but rather a description. That one day we will be happy. He points to the book of Kohelet that we read on Sukkot. There is a time for everything, which means even if we find ourselves dwelling in sadness, just like the Sukkah, sadness is temporary. And we can pray today that so very soon, our own time of joy is near. One of my favorite mitzvot is actually building the sukkah. But if I'm being honest, one of my favorite mitzvot is watching someone else build the sukkah. But I love the idea of it because we spent 25 hours previously on Yom Kippur praying and thinking about the world in which we want to live. But then right after Yom Kippur ends, we are supposed to take a hammer and nail into our hands and say to ourselves, that life I was dreaming about, now I am going to build that life. It's exactly what we try to do just moments after Yom Kippur. We say, I am the one that is going to plant my seeds of joy. We must be the ones to determine how to plant, but also how to build. The poet Stevenson once said, "Find out where joy resides and give it a voice far beyond singing, for to miss joy is to miss it all." Which means your joy is waiting to be found. Maybe this year in your sukkah, rain and all, we'll see, in California. Maybe you'll find a deep-rooted joy you didn't know could even exist. Or perhaps you'll determine for yourself that life's storms are far too grand to be seated in the sukkah. You know, we're taught that the roof of the sukkah, the shade, should be greater than the sun, which means when you're looking up and you see these glimpses of sunlight, it's at that very moment in which you can think to yourself, am I experiencing more joy within, or will I experience more joy without? Who would have thought that a preschool class could offer such wisdom? But this is the wisdom of our children and the wisdom of our ancient rabbinic tradition that has continued generation to generation. Zman Simchatenu. May this be the very season in which each and every one of us finds the joy that we are seeking. Shabbat Shalom. We continue.